Uju Eni, Jameline Indishnakas, Flying Post First Nations Nin Ndinjaba. Good morning and welcome to day 4 of the imagineNATIVE Institute's Industry Days. My name is Jamie Lee Reardon and I'm the lead Institute coordinator at imagineNATIVE. I am from Flying Post First Nations in Treaty 9 territory. I have long brown braids, I am wearing large green glasses, orange beaded earrings from Lisa Beading, and a green mobilized crew neck. I'm sitting on a computer chair and behind me is a white wall. We at imagineNATIVE acknowledge that this land located on present-day Di Karundo, Toronto, is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We acknowledge the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a treaty whose spirit is one based in collective stewardship and reciprocity. We take the spirit of this covenant to the core of our operations as we bring artists and audiences from many nations across the globe together through our various initiatives and activities. Please take a moment to think of the land you currently reside upon, wherever you may be, and acknowledge those who went before and those yet to come. Day 4 of Industry Days kicks off with a keynote speech from Australian filmmaker Jack Steele on filmmaking processes and community, followed by an important and engaging discussion about the need for on-set intimacy coordinators. We'll then dive into a fun and heartfelt conversation with some of the key creative talent that brought us the hit series Reservation Dogs. You won't want to miss our special TikTok message from our favorite stoic uncle on the internet, Brett Muswa, followed by important updates from the Indigenous Screen Office on current and upcoming funding opportunities for Indigenous creators working in the on-screen industry. Before we wrap up this year's Industry Days, we invite you to join us for a beautiful closing song from Luana Harper. To the Industry Days audience, Chimagwich, thank you so much for listening and joining in on the conversations, panels that we have shared, and for engaging in the chats and the live Q&As throughout the last 4 days. Chimagwich, thank you to all the speakers that shared their expertise, experiences, and stories with us. Chimagwich to all the filmmakers, the creatives, the arts administrators, the organizations, and the audiences and funders for the collective and continued support of Indigenous on-screen representation and creations. A special shout out to Netflix, our lead Institute partner, and Crave for their ongoing support. Chimagwich for tuning in to the imagineNATIVE Institute Industry Days. Hope you enjoy. Bama P. Say Bama P, Ashke. Bama P.
It's easy to say that you're committed to the team, but it's much harder to follow through. Eastside Games is all about the follow through, and that makes all the difference.
The culture at ESG is inclusive and makes space for people like me with mental illness.
They have created a safe, diverse, and inclusive environment to make amazing games in.
ESG has such a diverse staff that celebrate each other's accomplishments and milestones all the time.
People here genuinely care about the well-being of not only each other, but the world around them, and they'll take action.
People are nice and they're kind and they treat each other like humans, and it's really awesome.
It's a fan-based studio making games for fans, and community is everything.
It just gets me excited to come into work and get shit done every single day.
Eastside Games.
Yeah, Eastside Games is on all of our swag that you have says, proudly crafted in East Vancouver. We're a Canadian company through and through, and we've done a lot of great Canadian IP with some more Canadian IP coming out, but we are looking at a global lens. That being said, I have a big secret in that we're going to do the Littlest Hobo game any day soon, and it'll be the most Canadian collab ever done. Then I'll run for Prime Minister and I'll be done.
Tanse and good day to you all. My name is Adam Garnett-Jones and I am the Director of TV Content and Special Events at APTN. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the lands on which we are gathered, for those of us here in Toronto, are the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples. I'd also like to add that it is all of our responsibilities to foster positive and caring relationships with the lands where we live and visit and practice gratitude for all they provide us. Welcome and thank you for joining the imagineNATIVE Industry Days. A long-standing supporter of the Indigenous film and media industry in Canada and around the world, APTN's mission is to share our people's journey, celebrate our cultures, inspire our children, and honor the wisdom of our elders. For over 2 decades, APTN has grown alongside this festival with a community of independent producers. We look forward to seeing filmmakers and producers continue to grow and shine. Through initiatives like the APTN imagineNATIVE web series pitch competition, APTN encourages the emergence of new voices and perspectives within the media industry. In June 2021, APTN Lumi, our online streaming platform, premiered its very first original series, Querencia. This gorgeous production by Mary Galloway and Jesse Anthony follows 2 Indigenous women from different backgrounds who fall in love and learn to navigate the ins and outs of their respective cultures. This new series is a groundbreaking indigiqueer love story that I hope you fall in love with as much as I did. Now, we're looking forward to meeting with all of you during APTN's sponsored Industry Day with this great lineup of panels. We invite you to hear from guests Mary Galloway and Caitlin Yacht and dive into the creation of the television series Reservation Dogs. We hope you enjoy this day with all of us. Hi.
Hi, my name is Jack Steele. I'm a proud Wiradjuri man from Central West New South Wales, currently living on Wongal country of the Eora Nation, which is better known as Sydney, Australia. Before jumping in, I'd like to pay my respects to traditional owners from all over the world. I'd especially like to pay my respects to the Wongal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded here. I'm not really that great at doing these sorts of things, and it's also a lot harder to do when I'm talking to myself, but I've tried to structure what I'm going to talk to you about today around a few, just following the process of making a film, starting with the idea, then moving into pre-production, production, post-production, and then towards the end I want to talk about cultural sensitivity, around cultural policy, and also working with, as an Indigenous person, working with non-Indigenous crew, and some of the things to look out for, and some of the things that in my experience I've learned from that I hope to share with you. Okay, so starting with the idea. When I went to film school back years and years ago, we never ever talked about the idea. Even now when I'm writing scripts, when I'm talking to producers, it's very rare that I'll ever get through the door to a meeting just by having an idea. And it's one of those things that I always hate hearing when producers say, ideas are like assholes, everyone's got one. I think that's the biggest load of shit. And I think that that's also one of the most disrespectful and rudest things you can say to someone, because an idea is much more than a thought. It's something that you've actually fairly well planned out, but it's also something that comes before the development of something. And some of the best meetings that have ever happened have happened, and some of the best films have happened by just a conversation around an idea. I usually find when producers ever do say that, not to come to them with an idea, it usually means that they're not interested or looking to develop something at the idea stage. They kind of want something to be written out first, and then they'll start to develop it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that they don't have enough money. Producers rarely get paid for development stage anyway, so they kind of want you to come to the table with a script already. And one of the things that I've been really focused on at the moment is actually spending time crafting the idea before I get into writing a script. If you kind of spend some time actually going through the idea and kind of working it out in your head before you even get to the scripting stage, you're going to save yourself a lot of hassle when you get to the script. And chances are you probably won't run into as many moments of writer's block as probably many of us have experienced in our lives. One book that really helped me out, and this isn't a plug, I don't know this person at all, but this book has really, really helped me. It's The Idea by Eric Bork. This is probably one of the most helpful books that I've read this year. It talks about the 7 elements of a viable story for screen or stage or a novel for fiction. I won't go into too much about it because you can look this up and get it yourself, but this has really helped me a lot because what it's done is it gives you a bit of a checklist on whether or not your idea follows these or has these elements in it. And if it doesn't, it means that you probably need to spend some time crafting that a little bit more before you get to the script. And so I think that's actually really important. It's actually helped me be able to craft better concepts for whether it be for films, advertisement, even corporate videos lately that I've been having to do to just make some money on the side. If I've got to come up with a bit of a treatment for it, chances are I've used that book to reference my idea and to work out whether or not it's going to be something that will be viable. The next thing that I look into is the scripting and the story, and I'm sure everyone has their own little process around what they tend to do and tend to look for when writing a script or what attracts them to that, and that's fine. I think everyone has their sort of niche likes and likes. There's no real wrong or right way to go about writing a story. But one thing that has really helped me is using this book as well. Again, not a plug, but The Writer's Journey. This is thick as, right? So I don't expect you all to read it, but this has been really good because it's been able to help me understand you hear that saying, the hero's journey. Well, it's actually helped me to kind of understand what that actually means and to then cross-reference it with my script to make sure that I'm putting the beats in the right place. So I definitely, out of any bit of advice that I could probably give you just for this first section, is definitely like one of, if not both, at least one of these books. And if I was going to say either one, I'd say this one is probably more important. And I think it's really important to, like, as all filmmakers, to be able to understand story, even if you're not a script writer, just be able to actually understand the process around writing the story and where the story is at, where the beats are at, so that if you're a director or if you're a producer, you kind of know that all the elements are there to create a good story. Another really good trick to use when you're in the sort of the scripting stage of your writing process is before you start writing everything out, create a beat sheet. And if you guys use Final Draft or whatever software program, like script writing program that you use, check to see if they've got a thing called a beat sheet, because it's one of the most useful ways of nutting out your whole story. In the past, it used to be a whiteboard with the post-it notes on it, and if you still want to do that, great, power to you. I have a very small room to work in, so I can't do that. But beat sheets are actually one of the really simple ways of nutting out your entire film into like a bit of a timeline. And from that point, you can actually go through and check to see if all your highs and lows are there. And if there's anything in there that's just kind of not in the right place or not going to work, and you can actually then start to kind of identify that. Maybe I might not write that bit, or I'll delete that bit out of my treatment. I think in Final Draft 10, they definitely have it. Might be Final Draft 9, but anything from 10 onwards, they definitely have it there. And it's useful because you can color code it, you can just pick it up, you can move things around, and that's a really helpful way of doing it. A really good website to use if you're wanting to check out what a beat sheet is and kind of get some tutorials and stuff and some tools on it is a website called savethecat.com. I can't link it through to here, but this is what the website looks like. It's written by a guy named Blake Snyder, and basically gives you a way of breaking down your story into 15 story beats. There's software and there's tools on there to help give you a bit of a reference point on how this Save the Cat beat sheet works with certain films. So if you are interested in doing that, definitely head over to the website and check all that stuff out. It's invaluable as a resource. The very first time I wrote a script was my first short film, Between Two Lines. And it's a short film, the very first drama project that I ever did. And it was a story loosely based on a character of an Aboriginal soldier in World War One, which had a reference point to my great uncle Bert, who was a Aboriginal soldier in World War One. It's not his story at all. It's definitely a fictional story, but I just used, it as a proof of concept for a feature film that I'm trying to write at the moment about his life, about his journey to war and home again as an Aboriginal man. One of the things that I found really kind of interesting as a first-time writer, and I think this is something that is really important to share, is just how difficult it is to get people to trust you when you haven't written anything or you haven't directed anything. But then also how difficult it is to trust the people that you're bringing onto the film, whether it be producers, whether it be investors, whether it be crew, there are so many challenges and hoops that we will all jump through, especially with our stories. And I think it's really important for everyone to brush up on what their rights are, whether it's rights with your unions or with your lawyers, and every country is going to be different. But I think it's really important as a first timer to make sure that you're aware of everything, so that when you are writing these stories, that you're not handing the producer or handing the investors or handing the production companies that are outside of your control, handing over your rights to these stories. So I think one thing that's really important is just really spend some time with either a film and television lawyer or an arts lawyer that specializes in contracts, or get involved with your local guild or union and make sure that you run everything by them whenever you start doing these projects, because I think that's something that's really important to get off the bat from the very first day that you start doing stuff. When you start shopping around scripts, make sure that you are covered to an absolute inch of your life. Okay, so moving on to processes and tips of pre-production. One of the most important things, and the thing that I always like to do, is I always create a treatment. And a treatment, or a lookbook or a mood board, so to speak. There's heaps of ways you can do that. You can do that yourself in InDesign if you're capable of doing that. You can create I think Adobe has a thing called Spark, which is like a temporary non-public website type thing, and you can just put up all your images and text and screen grabs, color palettes and things like that up on there, and you can kind of organize it into something that's very readable. But for me, I think it's really important, actually it's imperative. The first thing that I do on every project is I'll create a lookbook. So as you can see here, this is one of my lookbooks for the short film. I just wanted to take you through it just to sort of show you what it looks like, so you can understand what I mean when I say that I think it's really important to have a lookbook. So I always start it with an overview. It's just got a log line, synopsis, a couple of reference stills here that I found. Then the first thing I normally jump off with is a visual reference. And I think that's really important because it just kind of puts people into the mood straight away. And they kind of get an understanding of what you're trying to achieve. So as you can see here, these are stills that I've taken from various war films. I think anything from Warhorse to Beneath Hill 60, which is a great Australian World War I film. The visual references go through. I think what I was trying to achieve here was show some reference to the night scenes that we had. Now, obviously, these are always going to be huge, big budgets, and my film was never that big of a budget, but at least it gives the cinematographers and the gaffers, the grips, the art department an idea of what you're trying to achieve. And then they try and work that into the restrictions that they've got through budget and time. So some more night scenes from a great film called Warhorse. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend it. Sometimes if I've got a very specific idea for a shot, and I've seen that shot before, I've seen reference to that, I'll copy those screen grabs from that shot and put it into a treatment in InDesign with the script written in there, so that when I'm talking to the cinematographers and I'm talking to the grips and the gaffers when we're doing our pre-production, I'm looking at them all saying, look, this is what we're going to do, and just showing them a very clear view of what's going to happen. And I think that's really important. I think it's also something that a lot of filmmakers aren't doing these days, and I think everyone should be doing it. But it's still a really good way to kind of get yourself into that mindset. And then if you ever rock up on set and you don't really know what to do or where to be, you can always look back through that treatment book and save yourself a whole heap of heartache by just going, you know what, I kind of want it to look like this. simply saying like that to a cinematographer, they're going to look at that and go, okay, great, let's do it. So now that I've talked about pre-production and having like a treatment and like a lookbook, a mood board, so to speak, having your script airtight, that's a given, and then moving into production with the right crew. I want to talk about some of the things that I look for when I'm directing a scene. So tip number one is definitely make sure you are more prepared than anyone else in the room. If that means memorizing the script front to back, so be it. If that means knowing exactly what shot you want, so be it. Because things will change, and when things do change, you need to be able to be so sure of your project that you know what adjustments you can make without affecting your total outcome. And one of the things that I want to touch on as part of that is about learning to be adaptive. And when you're in production and you rock up on the day, you've got your mood board, you've got everything set up, ready to go, and then the AD comes over and tells you, we can't do that because of any number of reasons. And for one that I'll give an example for, on Between Two Lines, we had 3 days to shoot this film, a 15-minute, 20-minute short film. That seems like a lot, but it is not a lot of time when it is a World War I film with huge amounts of set design and dressing. You know, there was pyrotechnics, there was special effects every single scene, there was smoke, there was costuming, and we had just found out that we were going to have, on one of the days, about 150 mils of rain in about 8 hours. In the script on that day, I had written that it was going to be blistering hot, that we wanted like stink lines, that the scene was going to, the actor was going to be overcome by the smell of all the dead bodies, stenching in the sun, blah, blah, blah. The AD comes in and he's panicking. The grips and the gaffers are like, look, what are we going to do? Do we have to cancel the shoot? And I remember I just kind of had this moment. I was just like, well, fuck it, I'll just change the script. So I just went over to the AD and the producer and I just pulled out the script and I changed blistering heat, stinking bodies to torrential rain and mud and wet, and just kind of went through that and said, let's shoot through it. And we did. But had I not been sort of so over my script, like so well connected with the script, I may not have had the clarity to be able to know, if I do this, will it still give me the same outcome? So that's why I said, make sure you're always the most well-prepared person in the room, because when we did make that adjustment, it actually made the better film. I was going to talk about post-production and what I would look for in post-production, but it's probably going to take a little bit of time, and I don't think we have time to do that. So instead, I kind of want to move on to something that I think is extremely important, and it's what I want to talk to is about culture and working on Indigenous stories with non-Indigenous people, or the process that I undertake when I'm doing a culturally sensitive project. So the first thing I want to talk about is policy procedures, cultural sensitivity and policy procedures that I take and I look for when I'm doing a project. A lot of the time, my bread and butter work is actually doing cultural storytelling for not-for-profits or NGOs. That's a non-government organisation. And it's usually going into communities, and a lot of the time they're not my own community, so they're people that I don't know or that don't really know me. They might know of me through my connections through communities and stuff, but they may not actually know me. They know that I'm a filmmaker, they know that I'm Indigenous, but that's about it. And so one of the first things that I have to do, and I think it's really, really important if you are somebody that is doing this, make sure that you take the time to go and spend time with them first before you pull out the camera. If you're recording a culturally sensitive story, whether it's around, a death in the community, whether it's around, mistreatment, or whether it's around what we call dreaming stories, which is like our, cultural knowledge stories, you need to make sure that you earn the trust of the community and the elders and the people that are telling these stories. And the best way to do that for us is we go out there probably a couple of days beforehand and sit down and have couples with them, get to know them, let them ask any questions that they want of me, and I can ask questions of them to find out where the boundaries are and things, and really just spend the time to make sure that we're doing everything respectfully and that they know that I'm going to respect their story and to nurture that story the same way that they would. Another thing that's really important is when you're working with non-Indigenous people on an Indigenous project, a lot of the time they might not know the same or have the same understanding of our cultural sensitivity, whether it's around, the way that we communicate with elders, the way that we communicate with people who have experienced trauma, the way that sometimes production schedules, or actually for us in Australia, production schedules I don't even write them on Indigenous stories, because when I'm doing something that's real, it's just going to be totally dependent on the family. And that's happened so many times. So to give you an example, when we did Unheard, that was with Prime Video, Amazon Prime Video, and Lad Bible Australia. And it was the first project that they've done like this. And so I really had to lead and kind of hold their hand and educate them on the fact that we are going to be sitting with people and asking them to relive their trauma. And sometimes they may just call up on the day that we get there and say they don't want to film. And we just have to be okay with that. And we have to make sure that we schedule it into our budget and into our schedule, that we may have overages and we may have to reshoot things. And when we're negotiating contracts with crew, we need to make sure that we tell them that as a condition of the film, if that happens, then we need you to be able to work with us around that. And it doesn't mean that we're going to expect them not to get paid. It's never the case. But there is an understanding that they'd be a bit flexible with our budgets and our restraints and stuff. And fortunately, we were really great. We had a great crew. Everyone that worked on it understood. And that did actually happen. I think there was probably 2 or 3 days throughout our shoot that on one of the episodes where the mother of the person that had died that we were focusing on just didn't feel up to it. And we got there on the day and she just really didn't want us to be there and talk to her about it. And she was really nice and apologetic for it, but we just had to accept that. And you have to understand that as part of doing these sort of stories, that you're sitting with people and asking them to relive some trauma. And as part of that, you need to make sure that you're looking after them and you're respecting them. And if they tell you to go away, then you go away. And if they tell you to stay and talk about it, then you sit there and through the whole time, you make sure that you're being respectful and you're being honest and you're being caring. And the moment those cameras turn off, you need to make sure that you're not just getting up and going away and patting yourself on the back. You need to make sure that you're spending enough time with them to be able to bring them back to normality without just walking out of their house and leaving them there to sit with their own thoughts and relive trauma again, because that's not healthy and it's not safe. And nor is it respectful. And so when we did Unheard, we spent a lot of time, with the families and making sure that, whenever we went through those things, that they were okay coming out of it. Which leads me to my next point, which I think is actually my most crucial point, is looking after yourself and protecting yourself as an Indigenous filmmaker. More often than not, we spend so much time wanting to do good and wanting to fight for justice by using our abilities as storytellers to tell these stories. And a lot of the time they're so traumatic. The 2 episodes that I did for Unheard were so traumatic. And I had not only wrote those things, I had to produce them, I had to direct them, I had to edit them, all by myself at times at home here in this office. And whilst I still had the support from Lad Bible and Amazon Prime and stuff, which was great, they were awesome. But a lot of the time you're sitting there by yourself with all of this trauma and you're having to take on all of these years of trauma that this family has experienced, and you're compressing it and taking it all in a short amount of time. And it can really fuck you up. Like, it can really fuck up your day. And if you're not careful about looking after yourself and protecting yourself, then you're not doing the family justice, you're not doing yourself justice, and you can actually cause a lot of trouble and a lot of trauma. And so I think it's really important to make sure that not only are you protecting and being respectful of these families and their communities and making sure that you're looking after them, but making sure you're looking after yourself too. The families constantly were telling me, Jack, this is really traumatic. Are you looking after yourself? Are you okay? Even still to this day, one of the mothers of the families that we were talking about, she calls me constantly just to check up on me to make sure I'm okay. His cousin calls me, probably once a fortnight to check in to make sure I'm okay. And I think that's something that's really important as Indigenous people, is that if we're always going to make sure that we're checking in on each other, that's a given, that's how we're raised. But if you're going to be a storyteller and you're going to focus on these traumatic experiences, you need to make sure that you're protecting yourself as much as you're protecting the families. Okay, well, that's pretty much wraps it up, I think. But just to recap on what I was talking about, make sure you spend a lot of time crafting the idea. I strongly recommend you go and get this book. I guarantee you, your ideas that come out of your head and onto paper are going to be exponentially better than what they already are now. The next thing is, when you're going into scripting, make sure that you start creating a beat board. Just really sit down and nut out each point of your story, so that when you look at it as a whole, you know where the highs and the lows are, where the first act is, the second act is, and the third act is. If you've got more than that, you've got multiple lines of stories from different characters, just put them all into beats and color code it, so that way you know where everything sits before you start writing. And then when you sit down and start writing, hopefully, it's going to make those nights where you get writer's block far, far less common. Third thing, going into production, make sure that you trust your crew, make sure you trust your producers, really make sure that because the people that you're going to be working with on that, you want to make sure that they're people that you trust, and you trust with your life, because these stories that you have may as well be your soul. So make sure that you trust them. The next thing, good idea, is to create a lookbook. A lookbook is great. A lookbook helps you to fall back on anything if you run into trouble. It also helps keep your mind on the vision that you're trying to achieve. And around cultural sensitivity, make sure that you're always being respectful when you go into communities. Make sure that you spend the time to really sit down and have a cuppa with your elders, or the elders of the community. Make sure that they trust you, and make sure that you create a genuine connection and relationship, because you want to be able to go back and forth into those communities whenever you please, and you want them to welcome you each time. And also, what you do also affects other filmmakers or storytellers going into that community. If they have a bad experience with you as a filmmaker, chances are they won't let any other filmmakers tell these stories, and that can in effect really damage our ability to share our culture. And lastly, making sure that you protect yourself and you protect those that you're doing the stories on, making sure that you, in any way that you can, that you are making sure that those stories are not negatively affecting you to a point where you aren't able to be the best authentic self to these people as a storyteller, because there's nothing worse than leaving a project and then finding out you've developed a lot of PTSD. You don't want to ever do that. So make sure that you're always protecting yourself and in turn protecting those that are around you. All right, and that's it. I want to thank you all for listening to me, and I can't wait until this pandemic and this lockdown is over, and hopefully I can come back to Toronto and hang out with you all and get to meet you all. I've got a lot of friends living there at the moment now, so I'm really jealous and looking forward to the day that I can come and hang out.